If I was to hold a class on management, leadership, and just being a boss in general, this is kind of what it would look like. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, this is episode number 234. 234. And ultimately, I'm going to kind of pretty much call it boss manager, leader. And is there a difference? Well, truthfully, there definitely is. And we're going to get into all of that when the main event comes around. There's no doubt in my mind that in order for somebody to be a good boss, they have to be able to manage everything around them and lead the people that they're working with. Almost should have saved that for the main event. But in truth, it's a skill set that is both learned and somewhat natural. People sometimes have it in them to actually be good at managing situations and people, leading people, or in general just being a boss. Other people can learn how to do these things. Now, there are certain aspects of each that some people have and some people don't. Let's say some people are really good at inspiring people, being good leaders, but they're not really good at managing situations or the pieces around them. Well, you can learn how to do that. Other times, people are much better at actually managing situations, but they're not really good at really inspiring people and having them lead. Then there's people who are really good at maintaining their face and being the person who is in charge, but they're not really good at managing situations or actually inspiring the people to lead them in the directions in which they need to go. And that's a skill that you can also learn. It takes a little time, a little practice, but it can be done. If you're willing to do the work, of course. And if you actually want to do the work, which is more important than being willing to do it, actually wanting to do it. And truthfully, I can certainly say that there are good things about being the person in charge, but at the same time, there are a lot of bad things too. And if you're not willing to take the bad stuff, why would you want to be the person who enjoys all the good stuff? Personally, I wouldn't want to do that. Trust me, because if you've never actually been a manager in anything or been a leader at something, you're going to know that people are going to look to you for all the good things and say, hey, that was a great job that you and your team did. Yep, that's great. But of course, if something goes wrong and things don't look so good, guess who they look at first? They look at the person who was in charge. And you're going to have to just take it on the chin sometimes. And you need to be ready to do that in order to truly be the person in charge. And man, that's something you got to learn. You got to love it, because you have to enjoy both parts of it. Because if you don't, the people who you're working with will never be able to trust you. And that's the biggest thing. Because if you're there to take all the glory and say, hey, we did a great job, it was my leadership that got this thing to work, those people are like, hey, you did all of that off of our backs. Another problem would be if you go there and you just simply throw, oh, well, it was Joe Schmo over there who didn't do what I told him to do, and that's what messed up the whole thing. Not a good situation to have at all. But in general, that's what this show is going to be about. I'm going to talk about kind of my road into management and leadership and some of the things that I've figured out and some of the stuff that I believe about all three: managing, leading, and being the boss. All three. And I believe it's now time to fill in the blanks. Only one blank, as always. one question. Here it comes. What would be the question for this fill in the blank, you ask? Well, I kind of asked or answered that question in the opening. Well, is it worth being the person in charge if you're not willing to accept the bad things that happen as well as the good? The answer is it's not. If you're not willing to essentially fall on your sword, there's really no reason for you to be the manager. It's not going to work. It really won't, because there's going to be plenty of occasions where you're going to do really well and things are going to go well. But sometimes when things don't go so well, it seems like the heat is even higher than it was when everything was good. And you feel like you're in literally in the middle of a fire. And if you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in a leadership spot. It's simple as that. So I'm going to simply say that for sure. I mean, that's the only way I could describe it. It's the only way I can put the fill in the blanks. Simple as that. Now, it's time for the main event. This is one of the main events that I really couldn't wait to get to. Episode 234. Boss, manager, leader. I'm going to start this thing off with a few definitions, which is kind of fun. Because in order to really be in charge, you need to understand what those terms really mean. I probably looked at, I don't know, a bunch of different definitions. And in the process of looking at those definitions, I found some key words that seemed to have popped out at me when I did it. So essentially, I'm paraphrasing the definitions based on a bunch of different definitions that I found. Looked at boss, and the most important thing that I saw was, by paraphrasing it, is person who employs or superintends. Let me tell you, superintends means oversee, essentially. Workers, person who makes decisions, exercises authority, and this is a key word in the boss term, dominates. I don't believe that was in the definition. I saw it in like 2 or 3 of the definitions I looked up. Boss dominates. That's the person who is in charge. No disputing it. That's the person, the boss. Next one is manager. This is one of my favorite terms because essentially I was managing a lot of different places. Person responsible for controlling or administering all parts of a company or similar organization. That's sort of piecing it all together. That's really what it all comes down to. Key word is controlling. As the manager, you've got to be able to control what's going on. And to give you a quick thing is, when I was working at Wawa in the management capacity, one of my things was I would have what I called controlled chaos. I would let things go to a certain point, and then I'd reel it back. I would let them go to a certain point, and then I would reel it back. That way, people could understand that, yes, I'm watching what's going on, and before things get completely out of control, I'm not going to let it happen. I'm going to control the situation myself. And then the next one I wanted to define was leader. Person who is in charge. Someone who can convince others to follow them. Inspires others. So a leader essentially helps to inspire the people around them. Not just essentially telling them to do this, do that, do the other. It's like, hey, I know you can do this. We can do this together. If you can do this, we can actually get this done. I can promise you we can do it. Making those people feel that they can do something. And then, because of that, they'll follow you. They will follow you. And I've discovered that is certainly a situation that was the case as far as any time that I was in management. I was able to essentially lead my people by telling them, hey, I'm going to promise that I will be with you throughout this whole process. If you need my help, I will be here. But I'm pretty sure you don't need it. You're going to be able to pull this off. I have confidence in you. And by doing that, by inspiring them, my people did things for me that I didn't even have to ask them to do sometimes, and they did it. They made me look good, and I made sure to let everybody know that those who were working underneath me were the reason why I looked as good as I did. It wasn't because I waved the magic wand and poof, it happened. No, it's these people who were inspired by what I asked them, what I told them that they could do, and they did what needed to be done, and they did it so well that it made me look good. Essentially, they were the high tide that was able to rise all the ships. They made it all go up because they did what they needed to do, and they did it at such an effective way. Now, on that term, I can certainly tell you that I learned very specifically how to manage in a unique way. Now, a lot of times when you're managing for a company, it's just what it says. You literally are responsible for controlling the situation. You have to understand, like, you have to know what this person's doing, what that person's doing. You have to kind of understand what they're doing. And for me personally, the best way to understand what somebody is doing is actually to have done it yourself. And I honestly think that when it comes to management, you can't. That's why they laugh all the time when somebody says, "Oh, I want you to get this job, but I need you to have experience before you can do the job." And the long running joke is always, "How can I get experience in doing the job if I don't do the job?" Right? Well, it's because you need those little things sometimes in order to get better at certain things, in order to do the job that you're trying to do. For example, there are certain things in the automotive industry, like, and granted, that's one of those places where they could hire somebody off the street who could simply sell parts and get customers to buy jobs because they were able to be silver-tongued and talk people into buying it. That's easy. Anybody can do that. But when I got into shop management, it was after a few years of actually working on the cars, so I knew what the person in the back had to deal with. I understood the difficulties of a rainy day, and you got to drag a car into the shop, and you have to put it up on the lift, and it's dripping water all over you. I get that. I understand the cold weather when you're bringing in a car that's got snow packed underneath it, and the worst thing that could ever happen, and it's literally the worst thing that happens in a shop, is when that one little bead of ice water comes off of a vehicle and it goes right down your neck. Oh, it's horrible. I can explain to the people who are who are trying to say, "Oh, why is it taking so long to put in a tie rod end?" Well, sometimes parts seize up and we have to use a torch and spray it down with all kinds of WD-40 and all kinds of stuff, and parts just don't come off like they're supposed to. And when that happens, it makes things a little bit longer. I can explain that because I've been there and I've done that. Like when I was working at Wawa, man, I don't know how many times I made sandwiches for people, and how sometimes I would do 3, 4 at a time. I get good at it for a while. I understand. I understood when my people were in a position where they were like, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on. I'm getting overwhelmed." It happened to me before. Now, right now, I'll use the Wawa example here for this. There was a point when I first started at Wawa in like 1999 where we only had little pieces of paper and we had to write down everything that the customer wanted. We didn't have the screens yet. Of course, during my tenure, we got the screens and it made life a lot easier because you could just look up at the screen and see what they wanted. But there was points in time where, as opposed to the screen, you'd have like 2 orders on the screen at a time. You could look at it and you could work at it that way. But there was a point in time where we had to write these tickets down and physically write it down, and you might have 5, 6 orders for sandwiches, and you're looking at all this stuff, and it can get a little overwhelming. I understood that, and I always took that in account whenever I asked any of my people in the deli to do something when they were like that. And when it got to a point, I would then get in there with them, shoulder to shoulder, and work with them. That's one of the first things that I would say is kind of a necessity. No matter how much you want to be in charge, you really need to get in there and learn the aspects of what you're going to be in charge of. As far as learning how to manage in general, I went to the ultimate school of management. Another guy who was a customer service leader, just like myself at Wawa, which is the first level of management. But he was really experienced in managing other different things, and he ran other businesses, so he really knew what he was doing. And his name was Tom Townsend. Great guy, really was. And he kind of took me under his wing when I was getting ready to get into management. And the first thing he did is he said, "Come on, we're gonna go out. We're gonna go play pool." And I was like, "Pool?" Wasn't really sure what he was talking about, but all right, we'll get something to eat afterwards. Cool. We go, and we're in there, and we're playing pool, and he sets it up, and I wasn't really a pool player, and he's like, "Well, this is management right here." And I was like, "What? How's that?" Put all the pool balls down, racked them up, and he said, "This is management." Okay. Our objective is to get the 8 ball in the pocket. That's when we finished the goal. That's the main objective. We want to get that 8 ball in the pocket. But before we get that 8 ball in the pocket, we've got to do all these other tasks first. We got to knock all these other balls in. And then once we've finished everything else, then we can finish up and be done for the day. Essentially, showing me that the tasks that I have to do throughout the day, throughout the night at the store, can be picked off slowly but surely, one at a time. Don't overdo it. Don't rush. Get them done. But they don't have to be done in an exact order. And by knowing that you have a final objective, all you have to do is pick off the small stuff around the end, and then you get to the major objective. You've now controlled the situation and you've finished your work. I was stunned. I went back to the store the first time after having that pool lesson, and the store manager and the assistant manager who were watching my progress couldn't believe the leaps and bounds that I had made from just that one night over the time of about a couple of weeks. I became better just because I understood that concept of managing my work and then managing my people the same way, knowing that, okay, I have this person over here as my cashier. That's my, let's just say, the 6 ball. I have to make sure that the cigarettes were filled up and the coffee aisle maintained being clean. I'm going to let that person do that. At the time, we had to make the wraps. So I said, okay, I have 2 people in the deli. I'm going to assign this person to make the wraps because they're faster than even I was. The other person will just watch out for the customers coming up who need to have sandwiches or hot food. They can deal with that. And that's the 9 and the 3 ball doing all that work. Then I would have my other guy who was there until 9 o'clock. I'd have him go fill the cooler. And I would just let all this happen. Simple balance. Watching those pool balls move around. And then at the end of the night, my safe was clean and it's time to go. 8 ball in the hole. Craziest way to learn how to do anything, but it worked. That was how I learned how to manage. Strange, but it was true and it worked so well. Now, leading is a different story altogether. Now that's something different. Leading for me was very interesting because the way that I really learned how to do it, I learned how to do it a lot of different ways. One of them was simply watching good leaders, like say Tom Townsend, who showed me how to manage things. I watched a lot of what he did and how he did it, seeing what it was like to be a good leader, seeing somebody who actually was willing to do stuff, and then he inspired me to do something that I did from that point forward anytime in any management capacity I was ever in. And that was, he would visibly make sure that he saw that everybody he worked with saw him do anything that he would ever ask them to do. You would always see him taking out trash. You'd always see him running a floor. You'd always see him making coffee. Every little aspect, he would do it. And so when he asked you to do it, it's like, well, he would be the one to do it, so I guess it's not too good for him, so not too good for me. And I started doing that same thing. I started making sure that people saw me do something before I ever asked them to do it one time. Because then they realize, oh, you're willing to do it, so I'll do it too. It's not too good for you, then it's not too good for me. On that same note, watching bad leaders was very important too. There were plenty of times when I watched people who were not good leaders, who would sit back, who would be lazy, who would just tell you to do stuff just because they had the authority to tell you to do it. Then there'd be people who didn't know what they were doing, but then they would expect you to do your job well. And I looked at that and I said, well, this person isn't giving anybody any advice. They're not helping anybody. They're essentially just doing it to be in charge, and that's what they're doing. The quality of the people's work suffered because if the person in charge didn't care at all, neither did they. And because they didn't care, now all of a sudden that person is now trying to tell these people what to do, and they're met with resistance. And it's resistance that is deserved. You can't just tell people to do something and expect them to do it when you're not giving any effort or any indication that you really are concerned with how the overall product looks. There was a situation that I can go into about a very bad leader, really bad boss. He was terrible. And the number one thing that this guy did was, I'm not going to name him. He lied to every single person in the store. Now, he was the big manager, he was the store manager. I was, like I said, I was two rungs below him. And I had been always honest and forthright with all of my people who were underneath me. And they understood that I was always willing to fight for them. There was plenty of times where people had wanted extra hours, and I wasn't necessarily in a position to just write them in on a schedule and say, hey, you now can work this and that. But I was in a position to have an ear of the people who did put people in the schedule and on the schedule. So if somebody said, yeah, I could really use a few more hours, I would then be able to listen, to keep my ear on the ground and listen to the other managers and say, hey, I really could use a little extra help on this shift, or there's a few hours here I could probably gain somewhere here. I would then suggest one of those people and say, hey, I got somebody who's looking for a little extra time. Throw them in. And they would usually do it. And they would get some extra hours, and that person would appreciate my effort to get them a few more hours. That's the best thing I could do for them. But this particular boss, and that's what I'm going to call him, he was not a manager. He didn't manage anything. He was a boss and a liar. We had a meeting, and it was about, what's today? Today is November 11th, 2025. This was in like 2004. And it was about that same time. It's literally about 21 years ago. Possibly to the day. I couldn't tell you exactly, but it's a real good chance that it's around 24 years ago to the day. We had a total store meeting where everybody in my Wawa went and into the training center, which they had at that time, and we all went and we all sat down around a really big table, and we were all talking about the upcoming holiday seasons with the Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas, and Christmas Eve. Those days we would get time and a half on Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas Eve, and then double time on Christmas. And as a management team, we had discussed and decided that somebody, like, did anybody want the money? It was the first, that was my thing. It's like, if somebody wants the money, I was right about to say, if they want the money, they should go get it. Like, they should be able to work that time. But if there was a point where there was a lot of people who wanted that time and a half and that double time on Christmas, there was a point where we had a bunch of people who did actually want that double time and the time and a half. And so the solution wasn't going to just be give people just straight up 8-hour shifts because it was extra money. What they did was they would cut it up. So you figure if it's double time and you work 4 hours, you actually worked an 8-hour day. So that's a good thing. You still made out. You got less time to actually physically be there, but you still got a day's work. And I was really on the point of having people who wanted to work those hours to make that money, and I told some people that I was going to try to help them do it. But now, back to this really bad manager. He, in front of everybody, told everybody in the whole store that he was going to be right there in the pits with us. He said, hey, I am the store manager, so don't get me wrong, I'm not working Christmas. But I will be in on Thanksgiving. I'm going to come in for 4 hours. And everybody's like, oh, cool. So they all felt that, hey, I'll go ahead and give up some time too. If the big guy's going to go ahead and work, I'll work too. And so it happened. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the store manager told the assistant manager, I'm not coming in. Put me in for a vacation day. I got wind of that because I worked that Wednesday. Can't remember if I worked Thanksgiving or not, to been so long. But he said that, and it got to me so bad because there were people who were literally going to run through a wall because he was going to be there on Thanksgiving. And I felt a responsibility to all the people who were loyal to me to tell them all, hey, this guy lied to every single one of you. And some of these people that I told were people that he had asked a number of times to stay 2-3 hours after their shift had ended, to come in on their day off. Yeah, he would ask these people to come in on their day off. He would ask them to stay longer than their shift to cover up some mistake that he made. But yet he told everybody that he was going to be there, and he wasn't, essentially lying to them all. And I made the statement to those people, specifically those people who had gone that extra mile for him, and it wasn't even for themselves. They did it not necessarily for the money, but they were doing it because they just wanted to be helpful, be part of the team. I told them, just like this, if you're doing this because you want the money, I'm not gonna stop you. Go get your money. But if you're doing this out of loyalty to this guy, remember, he lied to you and told you he was going to be in the pits with you, and he wasn't. Now, it's up to you what you want to do. If you want to go and get the money and just do it just because of the money, I'm all for it. If you want to do it because you're loyal to this person who lied to you, I can't support that. But it's your choice completely. And there was probably a third of the store that was with me on that note and was like, man, dude lied to everybody. I can't deal with a liar like that. You can't lead because you lose trust, and it creates dissension throughout the entire rank. It's no good. And I learned that real time, it's bad business. It's bad business. So, as much as I learned from a good leader, as much as you can learn from a good leader, no matter how bad the leader is, you can learn something from them, because you can learn what not to do just as easily as you can learn what to do from somebody else. And the real important part about that, if anything else, is you have to understand both sides. You have to understand that when somebody is telling you the right thing to do, you have to understand it. And when something is the bad thing, the wrong thing to do, you have to understand not only that it's the wrong thing to do, but you have to understand that it's why it's the wrong thing to do. Is it because of some sort of issue that's going to be causing legal repercussions? Is it going to jeopardize morale for the team? Is it going to impact the business as a whole by the customer impact? Is it going to do a positive thing for team morale? Is it going to do a positive thing for customer relations? Is it going to make everybody better or worse? You need to understand why what you've learned is good and why it was bad. Those are extremely important lessons to learn in that regard. You got to know the difference, and you got to understand the difference. It's really true. As far as overall leadership and management, there are things that you need to know just in general. And here comes a handful of good stuff. I believe that as a manager or a leader, you need to know what you don't know. It's really important. Know what you don't know. Granted, you might have, like I said, a perfect example. I can use the auto shop example for this for me. I was an ASE certified in steering and suspension. I understand tires. I understand tie rods. I understand shocks and struts and alignments and power steering. I understand all that. I also understand a lot of other little things, brakes and stuff like that. But I also know that I am not the best at engine diagnostics. Granted, there are some things that I do know, and there are some things that I don't know. And to understand that, well, I'm going to look at something and say, well, I kind of have an idea about this, but I'm not really sure. I'm going to sort it out and figure it out. That's not the best. If I don't know, the best thing I can do is A, look for the information, or B, look for somebody who understands and knows the situation. See, if you don't know something, you need to understand that you don't know it. And you need to be able to find a way in order to figure out that information, be it through reading internet, stuff like that, or somebody who's more knowledgeable on the subject. And as leader or manager, you need to be able to use that person or that other resource in order to get your advantage. Because if you can now pivot to somebody who knows what you don't know, now it'll benefit you and the team as a whole. Another good thing is you need to understand when to step up and take charge. Sometimes people who will be in leadership positions or management positions will just let things go on. And like I told you, there was a point where I had what I could call organized chaos. And I kind of had a rein on what was going on. And I knew just how far things were going to go. But my favorite example of me just sort of stepping up goes back to my high school days. Yeah. I was a captain of my track team, good old Southern Regional, from realistically my sophomore year until I graduated. And there was an incident when I first got to the high school team, which was really interesting. 7th and 8th grade, we would all stretch, and then we would go to our separate ways and do our separate events. In high school, for some reason, there was none of that. The whole team was completely divided into 4 separate parts. And we would only come together because if we were on the road and going to a track meet, because we all had to be on the same bus. But if we were at home, we would go right to our spot and we would go. Now, most people would understand as far as track goes, there are really 4 chunks in high school track. 4 specific chunks. 2 of those chunks look similar, but they're really not. And we'll start there. There is the sprinting aspect and long distance. They're all runners, but they're different, completely different. The long distance runners, high endurance, totally different than the sprints. And then there's, of course, the jumping, where you have high jump, long jump, pole vault. And then there were the throwers, which was where I was, shot put, discus, javelin. And we would just go our separate ways. And it turned out my sophomore year, there was so much tension and pressure amongst the team because for some reason it seemed like the jumpers were like, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, and we're getting all kinds of points. If the throwers would throw a little bit better, maybe we would win a few meets. And the sprinters are like, well, we're actually doing better than you jumpers are. And then the long distance runners are like, man, we maintain our stuff and we got our points. And it was really, really, really tense until a point where, in my sophomore year, there was a big fight in the locker room where all different groups were just like pushing, shoving. It was loud. It was terrible. Finally, the throwing coach comes in there and he yells at everybody and he asks, hey, you do realize we are all on the same team? And it was a boiling point. It just exploded. And then that next day at practice, a guy who I knew was a really good, our best sprinter guy. He was a 400 runner. And then the long distance runner, he went and, the pole vaulter jumped in the middle and they were all stretching. And we all were there, and like we all just got there and we started stretching. And as the captain in mind, I was like, this is these guys are the captains, and there's no shot putter, discus thrower, or javelin represented. And in order for us to really be a team, we all had to have our guy in that group. And so I stepped up. I said, okay, I'm going to be the captain. If not me, then who? And I stepped up and I got right in the middle, right in there with the captain of the of the throwers, the sprinters, the distance runners, and the jumpers. And now here I was, the thrower captain. And now it's like, okay, so now we all are a group. We're all a team. We've done that. That needed to be done. Sometimes we need to step up as leaders and show the rest of the team we are, in fact, a team. Somebody's got to take that lead. And in that regard, I did that. I stepped up and I said, I'm going to go right in there and I'm going to take charge. And from that point on, my sophomore year, I was the throwers captain. I was where everything went through me. I was the captain. Everybody respected me in that regard. And it wasn't even necessarily because I was at the time the top guy, but it was because I made that step and I said, somebody's got to take the reins in making this team a team. And the jumpers, the throwers, the jumpers, the sprinters, and the long distance runners had put somebody in there, and now it's like it's our turn. We have to do this in order to unify the team. And we did. We unified, and from that point forth, like even when I went back, the last time I was at my high school in 2005, almost 20 years ago, and I saw my coaches that were there. The team was just that. It was a team, and I knew that I was a part of that group of four that galvanized. I made that step. I stepped up and took the reins and became a leader in that regard. And because of that, it helped the team from that point in 94, I think 93, 94. From that point on, Southern track team really became a track team. And as a leader, you need to do that. You need to just step up. Another thing you need to do is you need to understand your you need to show your people that you are in charge and willing. This is a good one. As a leader, as a manager, you need to show your people that you are in fact in charge. This is the boss part. You need to make sure they know that, yes, I am in charge. Yes, I am willing to make sure that we work together and we are a team, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who's calling the shots. It sounds a little rough, but truthfully, if they understand that you are in fact the one who is in charge, but you are willing to help them, but you are going to make sure that the whole thing works right, but you are willing to fall on your sword for them if things go wrong, they will follow. And I have a perfect example of that. There's plenty of times where there was one time I'll use this story where somebody didn't quite understand that I was really paying attention to everything. Like, people would look at some of the stuff that I would do and it would be like, oh, he's really not really paying any attention. Wrong. I was paying attention to everything. And they didn't realize it because I didn't need them to realize it. I needed them to just do what they needed to do. And I had to show them that I was actually in charge, and anything that they were doing it because, now it sounds weird to say it like this, not almost totalitarian, but they were able to do the things they were able to do because I allowed them to do it. I could have put a stop to what they were doing at any time. There was a point where, yeah, I'm going to say it's a questionable legality thing. Not that it was illegal, but there was some soup that was sitting in the thing, and somebody was eating soup. But it had already gone bad, and they had written it off. Technically, by rule, you're supposed to throw it away, and that's the end of it. If you wanted to buy it, you could buy it. I can't remember what the reduced price was. There was a price. We broke it down. It was different. But the person in question, I was telling him, was like, yeah, it's like some people wonder what's going on. Like, oh, but I'm in complete control. I told him, like, what do you mean you're in complete control? I know everything that's going on in the store. And he's like, what? How do you know? I know that you have a cup of soup in there. It's been sitting in there for an hour and a half, and you've been taking maybe 2 or 3 sips out of it every little while, trying not to let me notice. But it's okay. You can eat the soup. And she was shocked. Like, she couldn't believe. She thought she was getting over on me, but she really wasn't. It was me who was essentially letting her know at that point in time, yeah, I am really in charge. I understand what's going on. And what you're doing is not so offensive that it's something that I need to address. Now, if that person was stealing cigarettes, that's something altogether different. And of course, there was a situation where it happened, and it just got me so bad where somebody was stealing cigarettes, and they fired the person, but they never really knew how they were doing it. And it bugged me that they fired the person because it didn't make any sense if you don't have the whole proof why the person was actually, or if the person was actually stealing the cigarettes. And it bothered me for weeks, like 2-3 weeks. And I just sat back and I analyzed things and paid attention to what was going on, and then I figured out how they did it. And once I figured out how they did it, which is kind of funny actually, because once I figured out how that person was stealing the cigarettes from the store, it was maybe a month or so later after I had told my boss how they did it. Company wide, they stopped using the situation that they had. I'll go into the story real quick. There was a situation where there was a kid who was working there. He was stealing cigarettes. He was stealing them from the cage, because we had a cage where cigarettes were at in the back, and it was locked, and whoever was running the shift or was the manager on duty at the time had the key to the cage and could unlock it and get cigarettes out. Now, it turns out we also had these hooks that we would have to pull milk around in the back. And there was always one up in the front because somebody would usually, I don't know why it was back by the milk cage, but it was. And it turns out that this kid would take the milk hook, go in the back of the cage, pull out a carton of cigarettes with the milk hook, drop it through the cage underneath, take out the cigarettes he wanted, pull the cage open just a little bit, stuff the cigarettes back inside after he took however many packs he wanted. At that point, they stopped locking the cage, they got rid of the cage, and put all the cigarettes up in the front at the register, where the cameras are right on everything. But that was a matter of making sure that people knew that I was in charge. I needed to make sure that they saw that I was in charge, and they needed to know. And on that same note, there was plenty of occasions where I was willing to actually work with less people because a person was not going with the program. They didn't follow what I needed them to follow. And I've always been the person who was like, I can get more done with less people who are willing to do what I need them to do than I can with a bunch of people who aren't going to follow what I need to do, because it's not going to get us anywhere. We're not going to be able to complete our goal if you're not with the goal. And I've had to send people home on a number of occasions because, well, it was just easier to not have that person and be able to focus with the people who were there who were actually willing to work. And every time I've ever done that, the people who were with me were right there on my side. They helped, and we got things done. We got right through it. It was always efficient, was always effective, and we always did well. And I always had tremendous success with those people. Now I'm going to go into some important things. I mean, this is really important stuff to do. Now we're going to get back to some of the other stuff. I mean, first thing is, as a manager, you really need to know where your pieces are. You need to be able to control your pieces, essentially. It's like a game board or pool table. Your pieces on the pool, your balls on the pool table are in certain spots. And you have people who are good at certain things. And you need to understand who is good at this and who is good at that, who is better at this and who's better at that. And you need to understand that those people who are good at those certain things are really going to be the best asset for you when they're in that position to do those things. Now, granted, another part of that equation is if that person, let's say if it's a Wawa, for example, and they're really, really good in the deli, but they just kind of get burned out. Maybe you just need to let them run register for a day or two to sort of get their mind loose and get themselves ready to go back and do that. And I've done that sometimes. Like I've had people who are absolutely killers in the deli, but you do something repetitive over and over and over and over and over and over again. After a while, you kind of burn yourself out. And the only thing that you can do in order to maintain that person's efficiency is sometimes let them step away, let them do something different. And that's good, to let your people do something different. They may not be as good at what they're doing differently than what they did, but in the short term, it gets them experience doing something different, and it gives them a break from the monotony of what they're doing. And sometimes it's good to do that, to keep your pieces moving around in that regard. But you still know that when the chips are down and you need something really done, and that person is really the best at it, you need to make sure that they're ready when that time comes so that they can do that thing that they're the best at. That's why you really got to know your people. Let's see. You got to pay attention to their habits. Example, like I said earlier, I saw the soup. I understood what was going on. I understand sometimes people are smoking. They smoke, and you need to make sure they have their breaks. You need to know if somebody gets tired at certain points. That you need to know how they work, because if you understand how they work, you can then understand how to position them for what they're doing. Like, you're not gonna be able to have somebody who, for example, had terrible back and tell them, okay, I need you to pick up the heaviest objects and move them to other places. Doesn't make any sense. You have to understand what your people can do. But the most important thing you can do for being a manager is you gotta be consistent. That's the most important thing. Consistency. So that people know that when you tell them to do something, that's what you need them to do. They need to know that at certain points in time, this is what's going to have to happen. Regardless to what's going on, we need to do this by this point. We need to do that by that point, and we are not going to really waver from that. If we get to that point and it's not done, we're going to have to ramp it up in order to get to that point. Got to be consistent. They need to know that when you tell them to take out the trash, you actually mean to take out the trash. When they tell them to, when they see you doing cleaning up the coffee island at this point in time, you do it all the time at this point in time. Consistency is key in a lot of ways. It really is. If you talk to somebody in a certain way, you need to maintain that, and you need to always sort of maintain that even keelness. You don't want to go one day and be like, hey, super hype, and then the next day be like, it doesn't really matter. Because it's impactful to your employees to know that they have somebody that's going to be consistent. They need to know that they're dealing what they're dealing with. They don't want to have some up and down sort of thing. They don't want to be going in there one day and be like, oh, you were really loose, and then all of a sudden now you're just being a jerk. You don't want that. Sounds insane, but I would say if you're a jerk as a manager, be a jerk all the time so they know what they're getting. If you're benevolent all the time, be benevolent all the time. Don't be a jerk one minute and their best friend the next. No. Stay consistent. Important things to do. Establishing control is important. Like I said, you got to make sure that you are in control and everybody realizes it from the get-go. I had a situation at a shop, and I mention it all the time. It's with the last shop I worked in, where I was transferred, and day one, I walk in, I'm looking around for the first hour or so, I'm checking the computer, I'm seeing the people who are around me, I'm just sort of feeling things out. And the first thing I did was I got a work order that I saw that the keys were there, and the shop was done, and it was in the shop for over an hour, and it was an oil change. This car should have been gone. And I looked at the kid who was working on it, or should I say not working on it, and I said, what's going on with this? What's the guy doing an oil change? I'm like, it's been here an hour. It should have been done by now. And it's just still sitting up in the air. And he had the oil filter in his hand, and he was just sort of messing around. And I'm like, bro, you gotta get this car done. And then he started yapping away. And I told him, do you want to work here? And he just kept going. I'm like, okay, fine. I went and talked to the manager, and I'm like, bro, man, hey, this dude, I don't know what he's doing, but whatever he's doing, it's not working. I mean, this car, an oil change for an hour. It's been sitting on the lift for an hour. He has the oil, he has the filter. This car is done. There's no extra parts on it. The guy doesn't need anything. All it is an oil change. Things should have been done. Should have been gone half an hour ago. And it's been sitting in here for an entire hour. You gotta do something with this guy. Needless to say, the other kid was in there looking at him, and he was doing his work, but doing it slowly, but not as slowly as the other guy. And 3 days later, I was able to get rid of that guy who was not doing any good. And what it did was it woke up the other guy. And he's like, oh, this guy means business. And sure enough, that other guy actually was pretty good, but he just needed somebody to light a fire under his butt. And that's what I did. There was a rate that was used at that place, at Mavis. There's a bunch of different little things that were on the computer. And there was a survey that everybody took, and it was an indication of how you were doing. And the store that I had left, we were very good at focusing on one specific statistic, and that specific statistic was speed, getting cars in and out as quickly as we could. And there was a 0 out of 10, 10 being the best, 0 being the worst. Our numbers at the store that I had left were upper nines, like 9.7, 9.8. We were getting cars in and out. And that was our focus, and we did very well with that. At the store that I came in, I looked at the number. Their number was 6.6 or 6.7, something like that. It was low. People were not happy with how long it was taking them to get the cars out. And I went in and I established control of that situation. And I said, we can do better than this. We got to just get cars done, get cars out. And that's what I focused on. And by the time I got there in January, and the time I left in March, the number went from 6.6 to when I got there to 8.7 when I was leaving. And the only difference was I was there. I established a level of control to make sure that these cars were getting in and getting out. It's really important to establish control if you're going to be in management. You have to do it. The next thing is you have to be willing to reward and not be afraid to punish your employees. It works both ways. Example, the kid that was acting crazy, he had to go. He had to go. My numbers would not have been the same. The morale of the shop would not have been the same if he was there. He had to leave. On that other note, when I was working at Wawa and my people did really good work, I had a good relationship with the pizza parlor that was next to us, and I would consistently, I would have dinner. I would make sure that there was pizza every so often to make sure that these people knew I appreciated everything that they did. Guys in the shop, if you did good work for me, I would make sure that I would give you good jobs. If you didn't do great work, there's no reason for me to give you the better jobs because I can't trust that you're going to get the good jobs done. I would also make sure to have snacks I'd bring in for time to time, give you something. Here you go. You're doing a good job, man. I see that you're doing good work. I'm willing to reward you for your good work. And that stuff was all out of my pocket. Not necessarily the pizza. That was a relationship thing. But I think I went into that before. But you got to be willing to tell somebody sometimes, I need you to do better. Or I don't need you at all. You got to be able to, like I said, but you have to be even-handed with that stuff. Just as quickly as I was willing to get pizza for everybody, I was also, on that same note, if I felt the need to write somebody up, I would do it. And that's where I became a unique situation at Wawa. I was sort of like the final boss, if that makes any sense. If they didn't think that they could work with a person on their shift, they would put them on my shift because they knew that I was able to get the best out of a lot of people. And I would get people to do really good work for me, to get us done and get us through. And they would always send people that they didn't want to work with me to see if I could work with them. And they gave me the caveat: if you can't work with them, write them up, which will create the paper trail, and then we'll fire them. So when you got to me, you had a great opportunity to be with a person who was going to appreciate what you did, but at the same time, I was going to call you out if you did bad stuff. There was You're going to get either or. Whatever you give me is what I'm going to give you back. And I made sure that that's what happened, and people respected it. But like I said, just as quickly as you're willing to do those things, to punish somebody, you got to be just as ready to reward them when they do good stuff too. You got to be able to do that. Another thing that's really important is you need to make sure that they know that you've got their back. Your employees need to understand that. They need to know. They absolutely need to know. Goes back to what I told you earlier when people were asking if they could get extra hours. Like I said, I'm not the person at the time. I wasn't a person who could write them in and say, okay, you can stay an extra 3 hours here. You get another day. I couldn't do that. However, what I could do is, if you were a good employee and you needed a few extra hours and it was getting a little bit on the busier side, and let's say you were supposed to leave at 3, I could talk to the boss and say, hey, it's a little rough right now. Can I have this person till 6? And by my recommendation, they would be able to get a few extra hours on the end of a shift. Or if I saw that, like I said earlier, if somebody was calling out and they needed somebody to fill in for them, I would suggest somebody who was asking for extra hours, and they would be able to get those hours like that. That was me being able to just let them know that I had their back. If they had to call out, if they were sick, if they had some sort of situation, I would tell them, hey, if you can't do it, handle your business, and when we come back, you come back and we work with you. No big deal. Take care of you. I always made sure that if there was an instance where a customer was being a problem for my employee, I had a policy that all my employees, whoever worked underneath me, they all knew this. This is the way I always felt. There's the business moniker of the customer is always right. Everybody says that, right? Not me. I've been a customer. Everybody's been a customer, but not everybody's been on the other side of that. Some people don't have jobs where they have customer service needed. And the fact is, the customer is not always right. And that's what I would always tell my people. Customer's not always right. And I don't know if I said the story before, but I know I'm going a little bit long on this episode because it's an impassionate episode. Again, at Wawa, somebody was berating my employee who was making their sandwich and just standing right there and just browbeating my employee to no end. And I was watching this and I was listening to this and I got tired of it. I was so upset with it that I was just absolutely going to do something. And I was going to let my employee know that I had their back in the best way that I could. Now, the entranceway to the deli was right next to, it was just a wall. It was straight ahead and there was a wall, and then you turn and you're in the deli. This person is right there, still chopping it up to my employee. And I just slowly walked up, not looking at the employee, not looking at the customer, but looking straight at the wall. And I simply made a singular statement that changed the outlook of that whole situation. I stood and I looked at the wall. I put my hands behind my back and I simply said, no, it's really not the best idea to aggravate the person who's making your food. And then I just walked back to the office. I looked out of the corner of my eye and I saw my employee just smile. Because she knew that I was watching, that I saw what was going on, that I was paying attention, that I had her back, I wasn't going to just let that person continue to berate them. And she was a soldier ever since, the entire time when I was there. Never hesitated for me ever. And that customer stopped talking, didn't say anything. And I just came back out of the office with a pen or something like that in my hand. And that customer was all please and thank you from that point on. You have to have your employees back. You just have to. Let's see. Sure you know, sure they know you have their back. And they do the job. They need to stand up. And then I guess the single most important thing you need to do in management, and this is where I'm going to call it quits after I go into this. It's literally the most important thing. It is, without a doubt, in my opinion, the single most important thing that you can do for your people. I'm going to start off by saying every shift I ever worked as a manager in any capacity, there is one thing that I did, and that is I was always the last to leave. Always. Like, I saw some of my other fellow managers, they finished up they counted the safe, like, oh, I'm out. Even though the person that they were working with, their employee, was still doing something, finishing up something. That never sat well with me. I made sure that if you were on my shift, I was running that shift and you were there, the one thing you need to know is if you're not leaving, I'm not leaving. You're absolutely going to walk out that door before I do. There's no question about it. I made sure it happened every single night that I ever ran a shift in any management capacity that I ever had. My employees were never going to leave after me. Even if it was as simple as they walked out the door and they held it open and I was behind them, I was still the last person to leave on a shift. It was never any of my employees. Even if they were just talking to somebody and just yucking it up, I would stay until they finished their conversation. And once they walked out the door, then all bets were off. But as long as they're in that building and I was their manager at the time, I was always the last person to leave. And they would never see a situation where they would leave after me. If they went back in the store afterwards, that's, again, all bets were off at that point. I stayed until they left, and once they left, then I would leave. If they went back, that was them. But that's a totally different thing. That's not even where I was going with it. But I knew I needed to add that. That was something that I always did, and I always felt that was really important. Let them see that you are going to be the person who is going to, not going to just skip out on you when the shift is over. It's not over until everybody's gone. But this is where I was going to go, and that's taking responsibility for everything that happens. You've got to do it. And I've said it before very early on. No matter what, if it happens on your watch, you need to take responsibility for it. And I always did. It didn't matter how minor the offense or how major it was. If my employee did something that was not on a level or off, I 100% believe that it was my responsibility to take it because I was the person who was in charge. They never, like, if it was something, of course, it was on my shift, but yeah, I did especially if it's something I told them to do. Oh my goodness. If it was something I told them not to do, then I'd be like, well, I told them not to do it, but they still did it under my watch, thus it's my fault. I always made sure to take the heat from that. And of course, I knew there was something else I wanted to add to this episode, and I didn't. But it fits for this episode because it's something that managers need to understand. Because it's all about the discipline of what they do, and it's Sun Tzu. One group of words that he said almost should have been the words of wisdom for this episode, but I have other ones. They are, if instructions are given and they are clear, it is the fault of the soldier. If there are instructions are given that are unclear, it is the fault of the general. So if you give your instructions to your people and they're perfectly clear and they mess up, well, that's on them. But if you're not quite clear about what you want them to do and they mess up, well, that's your fault. You need to own it. You need to take responsibility for that and handle that just like that. I think I've said enough about management and being a boss and being a leader for now. So I'm going to ring the bell and end the main event. And real quick, because I'm not the happiest with Week 10's results, because I picked the 49ers to beat the Rams, and I was way off. I said 23-17. The Rams won 42-26. There's just too many pieces of the defense that are missing. And John Lynch didn't do anything to help them on the trade deadline, so that was just nothing they could do. The Eagles, I picked them to win. No, I picked them to lose. I thought the Packers were going to win 30-21. It was much closer, and the Eagles won 10-7. That's another loss for me. But I was right on with the Lions and Commanders. No Jaden Daniels, no problem for the Lions. 44-20. Can't read my own handwriting on that one. 20 something. Either way. Commanders lose. Lions win. Ravens beat the Vikings relatively close to what I said. I said 24-20, the actual score, 27-19. But one that I was 1 point away from having the exact score, Patriots versus Bucks, I said 28-24. Final score 28-23. That was pretty good. I ended up 3-2. Not bad. 29-21 overall. That's the end of Week 10. Week 11, one more recap. I said Patriots going to destroy the Jets 35-10. Commanders, originally I said they were going to win, but without Jaden Daniels, I'm going to change that. Looks like the Dolphins have a little bit of momentum, and I think the score is going to be a little different. I think Commanders might still get 16, but I think the Dolphins might get 20, and I'm going to go Dolphins 20, Commanders 16. Bears, Minnesota. I think the Bears are on a roll. They're going to beat the Vikings 28-21. Tampa Bay versus the Bills. I think the Bills are better than the Bucks. Bucks are still not a bad team, but they're not the Bills. I see 35-28 Bills. 49ers go back. They've been on a literal roller coaster. Win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. 49ers are going to go back on the winning side. 27-21 over the Cardinals. Week 12, Bills versus Texans. Bills should be able to hold their own 30-14 against them. Lions are going to literally eat the Giants. It's going to be 38-10, I'm pretty sure. Steelers are going to lose to the Bears because the Bears, they're doing something. I like the Bears 35-30. Browns will lose again, of course, to the Raiders, which is weird because I didn't know who was going to win that one. It might even be a tie because both of them stink so bad. But I still think Raiders 17, Browns 7, and the 49ers versus the Panthers. Panthers are terrible. 49ers are still stronger than them. I see them winning in week 12, 28-20 over the Panthers. And that's where we go with that. This episode is a little longer than I expected. But Spear of the Week, there's only one Spear of the Week. It has to be that manager who lied to my entire store around this time at Thanksgiving that he was going to be there. It was unexcusable. It really was. He's the Spear of the Week. But now it's time to put the show away. End this thing. I need you to check me out on Instagram at Philip Henderson 5102. Join us on the Lip Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. I'm going to start doing the words of wisdom again. I'm going to record myself saying a few of them, and that's just going to be what it's going to be. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to probably start that next week. I'm going to go into my office and drag out a whole bunch of those cards, and we're going to go back and start doing that again. I think that's fun. I like the words of wisdom. It gives me a nice quick clip to throw out there, right? Speaking of words of wisdom, I'm going to go into the words of wisdom for today. Now, I'm just talking about being a manager, being a leader, being a boss, and it's real simple. Many people play chess. Doesn't matter how good you are, you can't win if you don't have any pieces. Many people play chess. It doesn't matter how good you are, you can't win if you don't have any pieces. Think about that. If you're supposed to be the person in charge, yet the people around you aren't willing to do what you're doing, you don't have any pieces, and you're not going to be able to get anything done. It's really just that simple. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.